Your text does an excellent job of contextualizing the beginning of what we consider the modern era of theater amongst the um, contributions to science and philosophy, economics made by some quite phenomenal thinkers. Along with the revolutions in thought come the actual revolutions as we head into the 20th century. The international conflict of World War I, the Russian Revolution, all of these set the stage, the stage was set for by these contributions to philosophy and economics that I mentioned, but it also sets the stage for how theater will be handled. So I'm going to run through some of the more noted philosophers, theorists regarding theater, and hopefully that'll help contextualize some of your reading better. Zola was a theorist rather than a practitioner. That means he wrote about theater, he didn't actually make plays. And he brought naturalism, the idea of naturalism, to modern theater. Strindberg wrote his own manifesto of naturalism, where he talked about how much better it is to have a psychological complexity. And like Zola, he spoke down to the middle classes and popular entertainment. He also felt that theater, like religion, in his own words, was on the way to being discarded. So there is a general sense of we have to save theater that a lot of these practitioners and theorists are huddling around. George Bernard Shaw actually wrote an essay titled Against the Well-Made Play. The formulas of the Restoration period offended him, and he felt that, along with the naturalism trend, that plays should produce a slice of life, and that the traditions of ending happy or tragic are just unworkable and unrealistic. I can personally get on board more with Shaw because his objections are about being able to present a story that the audience can connect to. His is not an elitist stance that really, really smart people will get what I'm trying to do, and if you don't understand it, it's on you. Meyerhold came out rejecting the extreme of naturalism and the elitist trend of theater. He said that varieties, these lowbrow forms of entertainment, according to Zola and Strindberg, varieties are significant and should not be dismissed as evidence of poor taste or low intellect of the audience. Laughing at a base or absurd situation or joke does not mean you're stupid, and theater does not need to place itself as above such antics. As a matter of fact, Meyerhold embraced the theater's close ancestral ties to the fairgrounds and admitted that spectacle is quite probably the primary goal of theater. It's to entertain. And toward this end, if you think of, the fairground caller saying, "Come look at the bearded lady," or whatnot, you also have the physical manifestation of acting in Meyerhold's biomechanics. Your text mentions this. And if you think about the contortionists in a fair that you just saw and these images of physical acting, it is about how the body is necessary as the actor's greatest instrument. Especially since you can get a lot of quirky modern playwrights experimenting with a lot of time on stage where there is no dialogue. In silence, does an actor remain still? No, not necessarily. Yes, not necessarily no, but I mean, this is where Meyerhold gets into the necessity of biomechanics. His plays also had as far as design, had a very constructivist motif to them, and there was an example. As we get to the middle of the 20th century and nearing the end of a definitive modern era, we are gifted with the work of Stanislavski, who gave us the idea that acting with the voice and body together are necessary in order to convey subtext. And he says, quote, "The text of a play is made valuable by the subtext, and is only finished when infused with genuine emotion from the actor's performance." So there is a very strong necessity for authenticity and physicality, because that is the way that we experience life, emotionally and physically. In 1968, Peter Brook wrote an essay called The Deadly Theater, and I love this essay because its primary point is, if you perform Shakespeare and it's boring, then you're going to kill theater. People did not amass in Elizabethan era theaters to watch something that would put them to sleep. So if we aren't at least doing something a little exciting when we perform Shakespeare, we're doing it wrong. And that goes with any play. And like Meyerhold, he hates the idea of elitist theater. He hates the idea that culture is something evoked by a sense of duty. And if it's boredom, or if it evokes boredom, then it must be a worthwhile event. Theater is experiential and participatory. It is not meant to be simply observed passively. Along with these other theoretical shifts and dialectics in theater in the modern era, we also have the rise of the scenic designer in the collaborative process of making theater. And here is a still from the Peter Brook white box Midsummer Night's Dream that Patrick Stewart refers to in the interview where he and Ian McClellan talk about Beckett and Pinter. So I want to harken back again to Julie Taymor's TED Talk, where she speaks of all the diverse influences that she gathers together when she's making a play. And this plays very well into your text conversation about globalism. We live in a shrinking world where we are exposed to more and more cultures that are different than our own. And this greatly influences what we're going to see on stage and on film. And when I was thinking about this, one of the primary examples that came to mind were Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2, that had a very strong Asian influence. So today, the West End in London and, of course, Broadway in New York remain meccas for theater. But in our ever-shrinking world, the opportunities to be exposed to theater are growing. Another interesting development is that Las Vegas has become what I like to refer to as Broadway West. They have taken the resources that they have at their disposal, fueled by the economy of gambling and tourism, and they're able to build more specifically to the needs of an individual production. For instance, here is a photograph of the theater that was essentially built just to house Phantom of the Opera. The work has been slightly adjusted for a new time and a new venue, but you are able to see nearly as many full-scale stage productions that we would consider Broadway appropriate in Las Vegas now as you can in New York. It's quite an interesting development, and it shows that Theater is adaptable, it is nomadic, and it still has a lot of corners of the world to explore and a lot of theories to test, reevaluate, and bring back maybe in a couple hundred years. A couple last points. I want to discuss this notion of modern theater because it exists in two simultaneous fields. One is chronology. We have the approximate dates of 1875 to 1975 encompassing modern theater, but it is also stylistic. And some of the hallmarks of modern theater are the idea of a universal truth, the struggle of man versus machine, experimenting with lots of non-realistic forms, the avant-garde theaters, and the director as auteur. Julie Taymor, as auteur of The Lion King, has an artistic ownership of the final product. Now, there is such thing as a postmodern theater, and what's interesting is that it can occur simultaneously with modern theater. The time periods overlap a bit, and it's not an either-or proposition. You don't have to have all of the elements from the first list and none of the elements of the second to be considered modern, and vice versa. So in postmodern theater, we're looking mostly at the late 20th century, and it rejects the idea of make-believe. Like I said before, theater is experiential. What is happening is real, and that harkens back to the Greeks and the idea of catharsis and the fact of going to a play and the process of witnessing a play unfold before you and participating in it with your laughter or silence. These all will affect you. The plays can reveal many possible truths. The lines between reality and fiction are often blurred. That reminds me a great deal of The Passion of Port Talbot that we saw the video with Michael Sheen's production earlier this semester. And there's also a concept of intertextuality. Nothing exists in a vacuum. Everything you watch is going to be influenced by things that you have experienced before, whether you've experienced it as an audience member in another play or film, or whether you've experienced in your life, experienced in a book. Intertextuality is a postmodern idea that basically means everything that you see, you hear, you do will color the way you receive anything else in your life that you see, hear, or do. Some rather big concepts. I hope that it makes some of this perhaps a little more interesting, and also hopefully of interest to you. I've included several video links for snippets of musicals. I've included a little information about each. I hope that you watch those and enjoy as well. And next week, the final exam.